في المحيط ولا في المحيط.
In late 2001, I took a trip to Aceh province, northern Sumatra in Indonesia. This episode of Corners of Asia is a historic one. It's basically one from the archives as it took place some 20 years ago. It's basically a war that took place at a time when the ethnic Acehnese were engaged in a war with the central Indonesian government. It was a particularly brutal war, invoking terms of separatism versus freedom fighters, all depending, of course, on whose side you were on. Indonesia is an archipelago of over 17,000 islands, the fourth most populous nation in the world. There are over 600 recognized ethnic groups and hundreds of dialects and languages. And with a population of 5 million, the Acehnese in northern Sumatra were one of these groups. Devoutly Muslim and fiercely independent, they have a long history of resisting colonialism and invaders. They once had a kingdom of royalty, kings and queens, and the Dutch graveyard in the capital city Banda Aceh stands as a testament to the longest war fought by colonial Holland. The Acehnese also resisted the Japanese during World War II, but in 1949 the Dutch East Indies ceased to exist, and under UN brokered deals, Aceh became part of the new nation of Indonesia in 1950.
The United States of Indonesia, embracing scores of islands and including nearly 80 million people, was a reality.
The fires of Acehnese independence increased, however, and in 1976, the modern Free Aceh Movement, under the Indonesian acronym GAM, was born, with resistance directed against the central government in Java. The Indonesian government responded with a brutal counterinsurgency. Thousands of Indonesian soldiers have been deployed to Aceh, including the Kopassus or Special Forces and Mobile Brigade or BRIMOB. Decades of military rule resulting in widespread human rights violations, including assassinations, massacres, torture, and disappearances of Acehnese people. There have been thousands of deaths and atrocities. A friend of mine's first wife was Acehnese, our first initial contact to the region, and he had been to Aceh many times.
There's about 8 carloads of journalists here at the moment. There's a major operation about to take place.
In summary, we headed out to Aceh a few months after the 9/11 attacks occurred in the United States. We first flew to Jakarta and met our prearranged contacts with SIRA, an Acehnese student organization seeking autonomy in Aceh. They'd also organized a major referendum for Acehnese independence in 2000. The referendum resulted in a major crackdown, with many Acehnese civilians killed by Indonesian security forces. I'd contacted SIRA via the internet. Shadia Marhaban and Mohammed Nasser were our main contacts, as we planned to work on a documentary on the conflict, which was then making international headlines. We had to be careful not to alert authorities to our activities. The two sides were engaged in brutal combat as depicted in this GAM attack on an Indonesian military cult. Contributing to this civil war was the presence of ExxonMobil, that was operating one of the world's largest and most profitable petrochemical plants in the heart of Aceh. The Aran gas fields was a joint venture between ExxonMobil and the Indonesian government, with the Indonesian military being paid to keep the multi-million-dollar project operating. Profits from the Aran gas fields primarily went to this Indonesian central government and ExxonMobil, with the Acehnese getting little. In fact, the Acehnese villages closest to the gas fields were not only the poorest in Aceh, but had the highest concentration of security forces and coinciding human rights abuses, of which Exxon would even be accused of funding. The economic exploitation and associated brutalities only exasperated the war, and it became apparent that sharing the wealth with the Acehnese was not on anyone's agenda. Shadia introduced us to Chut Noor, a Acehnese activist known as the Lion of Aceh due to her fiery speeches. She was later given an 11-year prison sentence for her activities, and it was clear that being connected to GAM was dangerous indeed. Here we talk to Shadia about a recent murder of an Acehnese activist.
International Forum for Aceh start to investigate human rights violations involving Exxon in North Aceh. This guy is a very good friend of mine. His name is Jafar Siddiq Hamza. He's a lawyer. He studied at the New School University in New York. He was investigating human rights violations involving Mobil Exxon in North Aceh, and he was killed. When he found all his bodies were a lot of holes by a screwdriver. I remember a week before he went to Medan, no, 2 weeks I think, he called me. He said, "Oh, I want to have lunch with you. Maybe I will stop over in Jakarta." We're sure that, the military are behind all this, because he started to work and investigating human rights violations involving ExxonMobil. How sensitive Exxon to Acehnese, I think you have to understand. And just think about him and,
We also went to a Jakarta prison where an Acehnese political prisoner was awaiting sentencing. Faisal Safieddin had been convicted under obscure Dutch colonial law for protesting against the Indonesian government. This was the prison visiting area where prisoners were taken out of their cells. Faisal's relatives even brought him a freshly pressed shirt for the interview.
What was the charge again?
So I have been in prison is almost 4 months. This is Rutan Salemba, jadi jail of Salemba.
Sudah ada?
Sudah sama Pak Doga.
Sudah ya?
Sudah.
Oke. Oke.
Oh yeah.
Hah? Dilarang kan?
Okay, Faisal, time is over. We gotta go.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and your come here.
We also met with one of the Acehnese lawyers. He was an ethnic Batik, who are mainly a Christian ethnic group from the Lake Tobel area of Sumatra. He was based in Jakarta and recently represented GAM members in court.
I go back from the court in central court in Jakarta. I parking my car in here, and somebody shot from here. Four bullets. This is one. It's selongsong. What is a selongsong?
Steel coated?
No.
Solid bullet?
A solid bullet?
Solid steel jacket?
The police said it's been done by the professional.
When you get to Banda Aceh, someone will pick you up at the airport. Her name is Nurul. She's a very good friend of mine. She will take you and arrange all your program in Banda Aceh.
So it was with trepidation that we headed to our destination. We arrived at Banda Aceh, were met at the airport by our contacts. An interesting incident occurred as an old Acehnese friend of Tim's, Muhammad, was on the same flight. He was the equivalent of a local mayor, and we had a tricky situation with Muhammad, the high-level government contact, and our GAM contacts all meeting in the airport lobby. We had fortunately gotten away with having to report our arrival details to local police.
We're worried because, they knew each other 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You two being with us, there's a risk, isn't there?
Yeah, everything we do in Aceh for the struggle for the struggle, civilian struggle, we have a risk with it.
The plan was to base ourselves in a safe house and move quietly around, documenting the conflict. Nurul would be our main interpreter. The ladies were generally in front of the vehicle, with us in the back with the hidden cameras. During the night we would switch the interior lights on to deter trigger-happy security forces when passing through checkpoints. Here we spoke to a young man who had been shot numerous times while going through a checkpoint. There were thousands of security forces throughout Aceh, and checkpoints and patrols were operating throughout the province. Sweeping operations were commonplace, as were skirmishes, killings, abductions, disappearances, and human rights abuses. Deaths in custody were common, and it was also possible to buy one's freedom by paying off authorities. Here we followed this motorbike to attend the 25th anniversary of GAM's Declaration of Independence.
This is under our control?
This area is under their control, so here is no military or police. Scott, dari Australia, this
Khabar. Siapa nama?
Ayah Sofian, we call Ayah Sofian. He's the commander here in Great Aceh. We cannot stay in the open field because some military service their helicopter.
Here we interviewed Ayah Sofian about the situation in Aceh.
It's a tradition in TNI to torture every people who they suppose that as the members of the Free Aceh Movement. In these two types of disappearances, sometimes we found the body, but sometimes we didn't find the body. And sometimes they pay the government of Indonesia to make the court of Indonesia to make their free. Biggest number who were killed in Aceh, Acehnese, is from civilian and children.
We got up early in the morning and followed the GAM leader to the location of the anniversary site.
يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك الكريم وعظيم سلطانك اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم
النساء في المحيض ولا تقرك الله العظيم.
Here we interviewed local GAM commanders.
In Aceh, who were the victims?
Di Aceh kekerasan ini.
Yang banyak korban itu pihak masyarakat yang dibantai oleh TNI dan Polri.
While deeply religious, no Western governments ever placed GAM on any terrorist list, and GAM was really a self-determination movement. We headed out to the arid gas fields with the poorest villages in the region. This was one of the first villages we came upon.
They are just a little worried that after they make this interview, someone will come here on 10, I will come here and treat all of their family. That's why they are very, very afraid that this is the first time that foreigner came here and made an interview.
This young man had been arrested and tortured. He said he was not a member of GAM and had done no crime.
I was took from my house by TNI around 5 o'clock in the morning. I was beaten and they threatened me to shoot me. My family have to pay 800,000 to the TNI to make me free.
He was released once his village paid a bribe to the police. Just a few days before, this lady's husband was kidnapped from his house in the dead of night.
The military Indonesia came here and knocked the door.
We stopped the interview because the child became distressed.
He get like a trauma and physical, mental because his father was kidnapped, and now he worried that her mother will be kidnapped too.
We found out a few days later that she and her son would find his dead body in a paddy field. He had been tortured to death. This lady's son disappeared a few days before.
My son left house last Friday until in Luxmawe in the city. He was disappeared. She was trying to find him anywhere, but he didn't find it yet. At 2 o'clock, she will come to North Aceh police station again because she's sure that his son is there.
She was clinging to every bit of hope, as only a mother has. I never found out what had happened to her son.
The Kopassus Special Elite Forces came to my house, and then they are looking for my husband because they didn't find my husband. They was using banana to my genitals. Kopassus is very cruel. They treat me and they beat me. They torturing me, and then they use electrical power on my breast, on my genitals, on my nose, and on my ears.
Mbak Ido, Mbak Plinyuang.
And how old is she?
Pada umur anak
26.
26 years old.
Then it occurred to me the child in the room was the same unborn baby of the mother when she was pregnant and being tortured.
The Kopassus was torturing her when she was pregnant on his child. Now she's 3 years old. He's 65 years old. The accident was in 98. The Kopassus came to his house, and then they took he and her daughter. They didn't find my husband. They took me and my father to Rumah Gedong torturing house. They was torturing, beaten, and using electrical power on my body. And my father was they beaten him, and then they put an electrical power on his ear until the blood came out of his eyes. So one day and one night in Rumah Gedong, they found my husband, and then they makes us free. But I don't know where my husband now is until now.
We located many other victims around the region.
Military was shot the people because they do not allow the people to reach Banda Aceh to get a referendum rally. They kill more than 100 people.
Boleh tak kata rame-rame na tidak ada.
10 iron police shot them. Yeah. The police stopped them and do not allow them to go to Banda Aceh, and then shoot at him. Was shot him at his leg. She cannot walk, cannot do anything because every day they threaten her.
Jadi urang tu aja ada soal.
Some unknown people was burnt my house. They don't know what is the reason they burnt my house. He was torturing, and they was burnt his ear with cigarettes.
Kopassus.
His husband was took by the Kopassus in 1998. They was torture him, and he's dead, but he don't know where's the body now.
There was a saying in the Indonesian military that if you go to Aceh, you either come back rich or you come back dead. And what they meant by that was that the Indonesian military budget was only funded 25% of its actual budget. The military became a business model, a business enterprise. And in Aceh, the military was involved in illegal logging, fishing, protection rackets, extortion, and liquid national gas production. The military also operated a vast network of checkpoints all over Aceh, collecting tolls, money, tons of it, that went into a giant slush fund. We also found out that GAM was able to buy weapons directly from the central government, the same military who they were fighting. The war was designed with the sale of weapons, and the Indonesian military needed the war, not just to fight GAM, to keep the funding going, to keep the military funded. The exploitation of resources, oil, the political agenda of lies of terrorism. These were all factors. Basically, the war was a racket. Overall, the Acehnese we met were all polite and friendly. The issues of the 9/11 attacks were fresh in the media and the geopolitical arena. Yet religious extremism was never raised while we were there, and GAM was never accused of ever being a terrorist group by any Western government. On January 26, 2004, an earthquake and devastating tsunami struck the Indian Ocean. Aceh was near the epicenter and suffered horrific casualties, with estimates of over 160,000 people killed. A peace agreement between GAM and Indonesia was already being negotiated in Helsinki. Ironically, the tsunami actually contributed to the ending of the war in 2005. Shadi was actually one of the advisors to the peace process, and Mohammed Nasser would later become an Acehnese politician. Faisal Saifuddin would serve a year in an Indonesian prison. Chut Noor, the Lion of Aceh, would die in prison in 2004 when the tsunami engulfed her prison cell. I don't know what happened to the girls Nurul and Chut, or the young man Faisal, and so many of the others. Ayah Sofyan, the GAM commander, was assassinated by Indonesian security forces in May 2002. To this day, the murder of Jafar Siddiq Hamza remains unsolved. It was 2015 when ExxonMobil sold its 30% interest in the arid gas fields to the Indonesian government. Okay. Let's remember Aceh in the eyes of the people for what they had endured, what they had stood and fought for. Also for people like Muhammad. Here he is, feeding his goats with Tim. He survived the tsunami but passed away from natural causes some years later. And of course, a special tribute should be extended to the people of Aceh, to the people of GAM and Sira, and all the victims of that conflict.